Hi, welcome to your course in statistics. My name is Charles Warburton. The first session on statistics is about the big picture. Now what statistics is, it's taking data and transferring it into useful information. The big picture shows us a summary of this process. So a lot of times the data that we want to turn into useful information is too big. The entire set of data that we want the data on is called the population, which is represented by this circle that's colored in with teal and the black dots, and each black dot represents a case or an individual that we want data on. In this case, the population is too big for us to get information on all the cases. So what we do is we get a sample. As you can see, a sample is a subset of the population. And so that process of getting information from a sample, we're going to refer to that as producing data. There's several different ways to produce data and several different techniques of sampling the population to get the data appropriately based on what information you want. But once we have the sample, we then want to analyze the sample. That process we're going to call exploratory data analysis. And that means that we have to take this sample and summarize the data and make the data useful. But how do we know that this data actually represents the bigger population? Well, that's where probability kicks in. And probability is needed so that we know how reliable our sample is to make an inference about the population. So once we run some probability tests, then we can make an appropriate inference about our population. That's what our inference is on. Our inference is going to be about the population based on the sample that we've taken from the population. So that's the big picture of statistics. So just kind of a quick little example here. So at the end of April 2005, a poll was conducted by ABC News and the Washington Post for the purpose of learning the options that the United States adults, the opinions rather, about the United States adults about the death penalty. And so the first thing that the study did was they produced data. So they took a representative sample of a little bit more than 1,082 U.S. adults, and each adult was asked whether he or she favored or opposed the death penalty. So that was the first process. That's this process here, producing data. They wanted to know what the entire population, in this case the population was all U.S. adults. We can't ask all U.S. adults what they think about the death penalty, so they took a sample. And the key is that they took a representative sample. Representative sample was of size 1,082. 1,082 U.S. adults was chosen, and then asked whether they favored or opposed the death penalty. Once they got the sample, then they collected the data and summarized it, and it was found that 65% of the sample adults favored the death penalty for persons convicted of murder. So now they summarize the data. 65% are in favor. That was the exploratory data analysis. And then in steps 3 or 4, the probability will help us to make an inference about the population. So based on the sample of 65% favoring the death penalty and our knowledge about probability, it was concluded with 95% confidence that the percent of people favoring the death penalty in the entire population is within 3% of what was attained by the sample. So we can say that we're 95% confident that the U.S. adults favor the death penalty 62 to 68% of the U.S. adult population is in favor of the death penalty for persons convicted of murder. So that was based on what we know about probability, and we made an inference on the entire population. Okay, so what conclusions can we make? We can be 95% confident that the population percent is within 3% of 65%. So we can be 95% confident that the U.S. adults favor the death penalty at a rate of 62 to 68%. This concludes Statistics Session 1.